This is our second video lecture for Chapter 16, Free Energy and Thermodynamics. So in the first video, we started off looking at the first law of thermodynamics, where we said the total change in energy of the universe is zero, that you can only transfer energy. And we also discussed what's the difference between thermodynamics and kinetics. And we did a little bit of review of some of the concepts of 1A, where we talked about the enthalpy of a system, and where change in energy equals the Q plus the W, so the heat plus the work. And we also looked at defining what entropy is. With this video, we're going to start off by looking at what is the second law of thermodynamics. And the total energy change of the universe must be positive for a process to be spontaneous. So for a reversible process, the change in energy of the universe is zero. But for an irreversible process, so a spontaneous process, delta S has got to be greater than zero. So there has to be an increase in the delta S, or the entropy of the universe, for the reaction to be spontaneous. So the system has to give up that energy, and the universe, the surroundings, take it on. The total change in entropy of the universe has got to be equal to the sum of the change in entropy of the system and the change in entropy of the surroundings. If the entropy of the system decreases, then the entropy of the surroundings must increase by a larger amount for a spontaneous system. So when the delta S of a system is negative, the delta S of the surroundings is positive. The increase in delta H for the surrounding often comes from the heat released in an exothermic reaction. When materials change state, the number of macrostates it can have changes as well. For example, looking at the entropy of going from a solid to a liquid and a liquid to gas, like we did in the previous lecture. Because the degrees of freedom of motion increases, this is why we see this increase in randomness, or the ways that the molecules be oriented when we go from the solid to the liquid and then the liquid to the gas. So to kind of help illustrate this concept, think about the water molecules in the solid state, so in ice. Remember, the water molecules are in fixed positions and they're stuck there. But the only thing that they can just sit there and do is just to vibrate. But once you start adding energy into the system, you start breaking all those intermolecular forces, and you go from the solid phase to the liquid phase and even to the gas phase. So here we're looking at a picture of the gas phase. There's all sorts of motion that the water molecules can do. They can rotate, they can spin, they can translate, which is move back and forth. So they can do all kinds of things in addition to the vibration. But in the solid state, they're kind of stuck there. So as you put energy into the system, you increase the entropy of the system. You've got more ways that the molecules can move. Here in this graph, we're looking at how increasing the temperature affects the entropy. So looking at the solid, so here we have our water molecules in the solid phase. Increasing the temperature just means you're increasing the vibrations and the rate at which they're vibrating. So once you get to the melting point, you have an increase in the entropy of the system as you start to break those intermolecular forces. You get the molecules further and further apart, and they can move and rotate past each other. So you have this rapid increase in the entropy as you undergo this phase change. But then as you increase the temperature, you're just increasing how fast they're moving. And so this is where you get the increase in the entropy as they're moving and vibrating and rolling past each other at a faster rate. But then as you go from the liquid to the gas phase, you have an even larger increase in the entropy. So you've got more motion and you've got more degrees of freedom of the molecules moving as it goes from the liquid to the gas phase. And then, of course, as you increase the temperature of the gas molecules move even faster, and so you get an increase in the entropy of the system, but not as much as when you go from the phase changes. So in this slide, we want to look at heat flow and entropy and the second law of thermodynamics. So heat must flow from water to ice in order for the entropy of the universe to increase. So remember we said for a spontaneous reaction, the change in energy of the universe has to increase. So the heat's got to flow from the water to the ice in order for the entropy to increase. So for the water molecules in the solid state to go to the water in the liquid state. Now there's a temperature dependence on the change in entropy of the surroundings. And we can relate this temperature, there's an inverse relationship. The delta S of the surroundings, so the change in entropy of the surroundings, is equal to the negative of the change in enthalpy of the system over the temperature. So when a system process is exothermic, it adds heat to the surroundings, and this increases the entropy of the surroundings. So remember, an exothermic reaction, heat is being released, we're withdrawing energy, that's a negative, and so a negative of a negative is a positive, so the delta S of the surroundings increase with an exothermic reaction. But when a system process is endothermic, so you're putting energy in, it takes heat from the surroundings, and this decreases the entropy of the surroundings. Putting energy in, this is a positive delta H, so a negative of a positive gives you a negative delta S of the surroundings. And the amount of entropy of the surroundings changes depending upon the temperature it is at originally. So this T in this equation here represents the original temperature. And the higher the original temperature, the less effect addition or removal of heat has. So because temperature is in the denominator, increasing the temperature is going to have a smaller change on the entropy of the surroundings. Here we're going to look at a reaction where we're combusting propane. So propane plus 5 molecular equivalents of oxygen will react to form 3 equivalents of carbon dioxide and 4 equivalents of water. And the delta H of this reaction is negative 2,044 kilojoules per mole of propane at 25 degrees C. And they want us to calculate the entropy change of the surroundings. So they've told us the delta H of the system, and they've given us our initial temperature. And here I've already converted it from 25 degrees C to 298 Kelvin. But they want me to find the delta S of the surroundings. And so the delta S is going to be in units of joules per Kelvin. So I'm going to use that equation that we looked at on the previous slide where the delta H of the surroundings equals the negative delta H of the system divided by the temperature. So when I plug in my values, I determined that my delta S, or my change in entropy of the surroundings, is 6.86 times 10 to the third joules per Kelvin. So combustion is largely exothermic, so the entropy of the surroundings should increase significantly. So the delta H of the reaction was negative, and a negative of a negative is a positive, so we have a positive change in entropy of the surroundings. Here we want to look at the free energy change in spontaneity. And for the reaction that we're going to illustrate this with, we're going to be looking at nitrogen combining with hydrogen to make ammonia. So as we watch the reaction progress, we're looking at the free energy of pure nitrogen and hydrogen, so we have just our reactants. And as the reaction progresses, as we start to reach, before we reach the equilibrium, going in the forward direction is going to be spontaneous because Q is less than K, the equilibrium constant. So the nitrogen and hydrogen are going to mix until it gets to its equilibrium state. And at the equilibrium state, remember the Q, the reaction coefficient, is equal to the K. So we're at equilibrium when Q equals K. But if we keep going in the forward direction and we convert more of our reactants to products, this is not spontaneous as we keep going in this direction. So looking at the reaction going in the forward direction, this increases the free energy of the system. But the system wants to get to this low point. It wants to get to the lowest minimum energy. So let's say we're starting at the reaction with all ammonia, and there's no reactants yet. So going from all ammonia to some reactants, this would be a spontaneous going in this direction. and Q would be greater than K. So going in this direction, it would be spontaneous until it gets to the equilibrium point. Once it gets to the equilibrium mixture, it's not going to want to change to either making a higher proportion of products or a higher proportion of reactants. So it's at this minimum is where the free energy of the system is at its lowest. So this is where it wants to be. So it will be spontaneous until it reaches this equilibrium. The Gibbs free energy is represented as the delta G. This is the maximum amount of energy from the system available to do work on the surroundings. So remember, this is the amount of energy available after the energy tax. And G, the Gibbs free energy, is equal to H minus T times the S, which is the entropy. But we can't directly measure those, the G and the H and the S. We can only measure the change. So we look at the change in the system. So delta G equals delta H minus T delta S. And the change in free energy of a system is going to be equal to the negative T delta S, so the temperature times the change in entropy of the universe. And we can also find the delta G of a reaction, where we take the sum of the delta G's of the products minus the sum of the delta G's of the reactants. When delta G is less than 0, there is a decrease in free energy of the system that is released into the surroundings. Therefore, a process will be spontaneous when delta G is negative. So when delta G is negative, the process is spontaneous because there's a decrease in free energy of the system, and that is released into the surroundings. So kind of a little bit of a summary here. A process will be spontaneous when delta G is negative. Delta G will be negative when delta H is negative and delta S is positive. So you've got exothermic and a more random reaction. So if delta H is negative, so a negative for the delta H term, and delta S is positive, so a negative times a positive is a negative. So delta G will always be spontaneous, or the reaction will always be spontaneous, and you'll always get a negative delta G when delta H is negative and delta S is positive. Now delta H will always be positive when delta H is positive and delta S is negative. So it will never be spontaneous at any temperature if delta H is positive and delta S is negative. So a negative times a negative is a positive, so the delta G would be positive. But if you have a delta H that's negative and a delta S that's negative, so negative times a negative, so this would be a positive term, then the reaction may or may not be spontaneous. It depends upon the temperature. Increasing the temperature, if delta S is negative, this will make the reaction less spontaneous as you increase the temperature. So let's say delta H is negative and delta S is negative as well. So when you have this case, a negative times a negative is a positive. So at lower temperatures, the reaction will be spontaneous, but if you increase the temperature to a certain point, this factor gets larger than the delta S, then eventually the reaction will become non-spontaneous. But let's say we have a positive delta H and a positive delta S. Well, remember, if delta H is positive and delta S is positive, this will be subtracting these two portions. So at low temperatures, let's say temperatures of 0, so we're at 0 K. At 0 K, the delta H would be positive and wouldn't be spontaneous. But as you start increasing the temperature, you're subtracting amount from the delta H. And there eventually gets to be a point where these two terms are equal when you're increasing the temperature. But once the temperature gets large enough, then this term becomes overall negative and the reaction will become spontaneous. And when delta G equals 0, the reaction is at equilibrium. So here let's kind of look at a little bit of a summary here. So delta H is negative, delta S is positive. This would be a spontaneous reaction because this would be a negative value. No matter what temperature, it's always going to be spontaneous. But if we have a positive delta H and a negative delta S, this will be non-spontaneous no matter what the temperature is. But if we have a negative delta H and a negative delta S, it's spontaneous at low temperatures, but it's going to be non-spontaneous at higher temperatures. And if we see reverse signs of that where we have positive delta H and positive delta S, it's going to be non-spontaneous at low temperatures, but as you start increasing the temperature, it will become spontaneous. So here we're looking at the reaction of carbon tetrachloride decomposing into graphite and 2 equivalents of chlorine gas. And they give us that the delta H of the reaction is 95.7 kilojoules and the delta S is 142.2 joules per Kelvin at 25 degrees C. They want us to calculate the delta G and determine if it is spontaneous. So we're given the delta H and we're given the delta S and we're given the temperature. And they want us to find the delta G. Well, I can use the equation delta G equals delta H minus T delta S to find that delta G. So if I substitute in my delta H, which was 95.7 kilojoules, and my temperature at 25 degrees C, but I'm going to need that in Kelvin, so I'm going to convert my Celsius to Kelvin, so I'm going to use 298. And my delta S, my change in entropy, is 142.2 joules per Kelvin. So this is why I had to have my temperature in Kelvin. I need those K's to cancel out. And then when I subtract these two terms, I need these both in the same units. So this is why I converted my delta H from kilojoules to joules, so that when I subtract these, I'm subtracting joules and joules. So my change in free energy of the system is positive 5.33 times 10 to the 4th joules. And since this is a positive value, this is a non-spontaneous reaction. It's not going to happen readily on its own. So if we wanted to make it spontaneous, we would have to increase the temperature. So here in this example, we're looking at that same system as before, but now we want to figure out the minimum temperature at which it will be spontaneous. So we still have the delta H and the delta S of the reaction, but for it to be spontaneous, we want a delta G to be less than 0. So we're going to have to find temperature. Have our delta G and our delta H and delta S. Well, I know that the delta G needs to be negative. So using the delta G equals delta H minus T delta S. At 0 delta G, we know that the reaction's neither spontaneous or spontaneous. That's kind of our set point. But we have to increase the temperature above that gives us 0 for the reaction to be spontaneous. So to kind of think about this, what I typically do is I say, well, let's just make the delta G 0. So that's where we make that transition over from the delta G being positive to negative. So 0 equals delta H minus T delta S. So then getting the delta H isolated, the delta H equals T delta S, temperature, which we'll have to increase it to so that the reaction starts to become spontaneous. So when I solve for my temperature, divide both sides by the delta S. So delta H divided by the delta S will give me the temperature at which delta G equals 0. So I know that the temperature has to be greater to make the delta G negative. So when I plug in my values to find my T, so my delta H over my delta S, I get 673 Kelvin. So the temperature has to be larger than 673 for that reaction to become spontaneous, so that I have a negative delta G.